Okay, I guess the recording has started. So now you see that the screen is also visible. I hope so. All right, so let me begin. What we are going to do in this class is to just see what is object-oriented programming with respect to how .NET has structured it, because .NET is completely object-oriented. Whatever language you use inside .NET is by default supported by object-oriented programming. So let me begin with a simple project, and let me show you where all these object-oriented programming picture comes into. All right, so before I continue with that, I would like you to answer a few questions which you already know. So let's see how many of you remember. In the last, when I started taking Java, if you remember, we had come across 5 keywords. Yes? Can you tell me those 5 keywords in order, if possible? What is the first important keyword we have come across in object-oriented programming? No one remembers? Arguments. Start the connection. No. I'm not talking about, yes, Nafla, thank you. Not talking about JDBC. I said object-oriented programming. So class, object, perfect. Okay. Then functions, okay. Objects, okay. Class, objects, that's fine. Key value pair. In other words, there are different words. I'll repeat it again. So functions, variables, good. Okay, arguments or variables, functions or subs, events. Perfect, Nafla. All right, so what Nafla has said with all the 5 keywords, I'll repeat it again. Number 1, class. Number 2, objects. Number 3 is synonyms, actually. First one, you use the word properties some places. In some places, we use the word attributes. In some places, we use the word variables. In some places, they use the word arguments. It doesn't matter. Basically, they are what just Riona told, name value, or Rachana told, sorry. Rachana Pai has told name value pair. All right, so same thing. Name value pair, key value pair, as Riona told. Okay, doesn't matter. Either way, is the idea is name is equal to value or key is equal to value. This thing is called as a property. Okay, the next one is functions. In some languages, we call it as functions. VB, we call it as sub-procedure. And in Java, we call it as methods. In Excel, you use the word macro. Okay, and it goes on like this. But idea is a set of code, a block of code, which can be reused again and again. That's a function or a sub. Last one is events. Or sometimes they call it as actions or events. Okay, so in Android we use the word listener to an action specifier. Please note it's an action listener, but also you can call it as event listener. Doesn't matter. The idea is still the same. Okay, so these are the 5 keywords. Now I wanted to see how I'm going to apply that in programming. Okay, so let's take a real application. Please note, before even we began with web applications, desktop applications were very famous, and they were kind of the standard because everybody has, right, even now we are using a lot of desktop applications without which we might not find much use with our laptop. So let me just create a new project. This time I'm going to choose Visual C#. Okay, guys, from next class onwards, I'll not use Google Meet recording. I'll record my screen instead of this because I felt that the video is looking very small, and I think 25% of the screen is taken by the profile picture on the right side. So I'll just try to record my screen instead of recording the meeting itself. That might be helpful for us, and then I can host it in this one and share the link to you. Anyway, in this class, I'll start with Visual C#. But instead of choosing what we are supposed to study for the subject, I'm going to choose Classic Desktop just to make sure that you understand how it works. I'm going to choose Windows Forms, .NET Framework, Windows Forms with C#. And I'm going to just say Demo Forms. Okay, I'm going to create a new project. So now, I created a project. Okay, and you see a small desktop window available there. Without doing anything, if I just click on this, okay, a program should run, my program should work, and I should get the window which I just created without even writing any code. Just a simple demoforms.exe is expected to run. Okay, I think you're not able to see that. Okay, so let me share the screen with full screen. I guess now it's visible. Okay, so here you can see that there's a form running without anything. It's just a form. Okay, it has minimize, maximize, close. All these things are, it's working, it's running. Minimize will work. Okay, maximize is working, closing is working. So this is a simple application which system is automatically given to you. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this form and tell where and all this object-oriented programming is come into picture. If you remember, according to Java, everything should be inside a class. Now, what about this form? Is that inside a class? Yes, it is inside a class, first of all. Okay, so let me just right click on it and say view code. You can see the code which is used for this particular page. Okay, I hope the code is clear and visible. Okay, I'm not going to explain the code much, but then I would like you to look at this code and see there is nothing written here much. Okay, it's just one class and some initialize, that's all is written. But if you see the output has a full screen which has minimize, maximize, and close. If you see that, where is the logic of that minimize, maximize, and close written? Okay, it's also logic, right? If you click on it, it should go down, and maximize means it should take the entire screen. Close means it should close the entire application. These are logic, but then it is not written anywhere and you're not seeing the code for that. The reason is these are something which is available in all your Windows-based applications. If you notice, every Windows-based application would have minimize, maximize, close. Okay, let it be Notepad, let it be Chrome, let it be Windows, whatever you choose, it will still have minimize, maximize, and close. These are something which are common or same in all my forms which I'm seeing, which means it's a property of a class. Okay, so what is the class here? If you see the code carefully, in Java, we use the word extends. Okay, in VB, we use the word inherits. And in C++, if you remember, we use double colon. Okay, what does all these things mean? It means inheritance. Here in C#, it is just one colon. I hope you can see that. All right, so the one which I am running right now is form1.cs. I hope the file name is visible to you guys. Okay, so it's running as form1.cs. So what is the class name? Form1. But this is not an inbuilt class. The inbuilt class is here. Okay, this is the form which is coming, which is inbuilt. And from here, I am extending. In other words, form1 inherits from form class. So that's why I don't find anything, without even writing anything, I got this basic structure ready, which means reuse of code. Okay, now I can just start working with it as it is. Now, let me begin with the object-oriented programming concept. Now, if you go to Toolbox, most of you would have done this in VB. In Toolbox, there'll be a lot of controls. You can just drag and drop it, just like how we had in Android also. In Android, we had something called a palette, from which you just drag and drop controls, and XML was generated, and you can make that work by using by writing Java code. Now, when it comes to .NET or any technology within .NET framework, earlier, I'm talking about when before .NET WPF and all came into picture, they used the same language to generate code as well as design. Okay, I'm repeating it again. Those who have worked with applet will understand that. You write code also, the logic of the program also in Java, design also you will write it in Java. That is applet. Okay, but when it comes to this one, Android, when you wrote, you didn't write the design in Java. You wrote the design in XML, and the code you wrote in Java. Here, this is old. That's what I'm saying. This is also an old technology. Here, code also is written in C#. Design also is written in C#. Okay, but it is not shown to you because they would like to hide the complexity from you. Okay, but you don't have much control over the code which is generated because you only see, and it is a visual development. All right, so this is what programming has been in .NET framework. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put one control onto my form, okay, and let me see whether all those object-oriented programming comes into picture. I'll just open common controls here. I guess you can see that. Just have a glance. You have some controls there, starting with button, checkbox, date, label, list box, list view, picture, progress bar, like that. Lots of controls are available. Now, what I would like to do is, I'm just going to take, I'm not here to explain Windows Forms, guys. Please remember that this program or this particular entire session is only dedicated to understand what is object-oriented programming with respect to application. Okay, so here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to just drag and drop a button. Okay, so when I drag and drop a button, what is this button basically? If you see the description which is given, it is a .NET component. Is it possible to see the word? It says version 4.6.1.0 from Microsoft .NET component. Okay, remember the word component because whatever you see in this side in the toolbox are considered as components. What do you mean by a component? Something which is self-sufficient, which will not run alone. It has to be put together. Like for example, components of a bicycle. All right, a wheel, pedal, the chain. These things are components of a cycle. Only with the one wheel, I cannot be calling it as a bicycle. Only with the chain, I cannot call it as a bicycle. When I put all these things together, then I make up a full-fledged bicycle. So what I'm going to do is a button is a component, which means it is a class which is written separately. Okay, why am I calling button as a class is because if you remember in applet, if you remember how to create a button, a J button space B1 is equal to new J button. You create a new instance of the button, which means button is a class, right? So how do I explain this? When I drag and drop a button, basically what I'm trying to do here is I'm creating an object of the button component. So let me just drag and drop one button. So please note when I drag and drop it, the one which is there in the toolbox is a class, and the one which I'm actually talking to is going to be object. I hope that is clear. Okay, I'm repeating it again. This acts like a class. This is an object. Why? Because if it was an object directly, once I drag and drop it, it should not remain here. But now I can drag and drop how many ever buttons I want from that one thing, which means this is a class. And I've created 3 objects of this particular class. I hope this is clear. Okay, so let me continue further. So here, this is the object. So this is the class. 2 keywords are done. Class, object. What are the remaining 3 keywords? Okay, properties, methods, events. Let's focus on that. So let me just close this. Let's see. This is a button, and this button has its own properties. So let me just zoom out. Let me go right click on the button and then say properties. I hope it is visible. Okay, let me just click on properties. Okay, it will open one more tab on the right hand side. Most of you are familiar with this, but just let me repeat. Okay, these are, please note the word, what they have used is properties. Okay, if you remember in Android Studio, the same word was replaced with attributes. Okay, there is a reason why it was called attributes, because the design in Android was written in XML, a markup language. In all markup languages, these things are called as attributes. If you remember from HTML onwards, in HTML we call tags. Every tag has its own attributes. For example, img is a tag, src is an attribute. Here, property. But what is the common thing between them? src is equal to file name. Name is equal to value. Here, what do you see? All right, so here I'll just sort it according to name. You see, first one, the ID or the name of your button, button 1. Okay, and let's just only focus on some things which are important. Next one, let's say what you want to give as the text. Here, button 1 is there. So name is text. What is the value? Value, I'm just going to say click here. I'll just type it here, which means my button would now change into a word called click here. All right, so that's one property I've changed. Now, does it mean that it will affect my class? No. If I drag and drop another button, it will still say button 2, because this button is modified according to my wish, but then that is not the class. It is just an object. So whatever I manipulate with the object will not affect the class. Okay, remember that. So now first thing what I've done is property. I've taken care of a properties, and there are a lot of properties in this window. If you see, everything has a name this side, value on the other side. I hope this is clear. So properties is done. Second, what is the second one? Okay, so let's take second and third one together. Second one is if you have some lines of code which you want to execute every time, or you want to reuse a particular block of code, what would you like to do? Okay, so whenever you want to reuse something in your program, you will have to write it inside a function or a method or a sub procedure or a macro. Okay, you can call whatever you want. Here we'll call it as a method because it's an object-oriented program. It's like somewhat similar to Java. So in Java we call it as method. Here also we'll call it as method. But in VB we'll not call it as a method. We'll call it as a sub procedure or a function. Okay, so in VB if it returns something, it is a function. If it doesn't return anything, it is a sub procedure. Here in C# everything is just called as method. Whether you can return something or you're not returning something, doesn't matter. It is still called as a method. Now, the last one is event. What can you do on a button? You can click on it. You can double click on it. You can move your mouse over it. All these are events which are possible from that particular button. So let me just focus on the same place as properties. And if you see near properties, there is something called with the lightning bolt there. Okay, I'll just move my mouse over. You can see what does it mean. It means events. So when I click on events, I see all events which are possible by the button object, button 1 object. Please note, I have not changed the ID of the button. It is still telling button 1. Okay, so anyway, here you see all these things are possible over a button. So I can just click on a button, and if you see here, it is asking for something, but there's no option for you to choose from, because you have to create something which will be called when you click on the button. Okay, so how do I do that? So I'll just double click here. Okay, or you can just come here and then press enter. It will create a method. Okay, I hope it's visible for you. So you see what the system has created is, it has created a simple method called button1 underscore click, and something is passed and some method. This block of code is called as a method. Okay, and this method will be called every time you click on this button. So please note 5 things about a particular object-oriented programming. Number 1, class. I dragged and dropped it, which means I created an instance of a class, which is nothing but an object. And this object has its own properties. Its properties are there, and it also reacts to some events. So when you click on this button, what do you want me to do? You want me to write a block of code which will be called every time you click on the button. Okay, I'll give examples, guys, but just think like this. Okay, every time you click on this specific button, button 1, what will happen? Whatever you write here in this place where the cursor is blinking will be called. You can write 1 line of code there, 10 lines of code, or n lines of code, doesn't matter. Whatever you write here will be called again and again whenever you click on that particular button. So a block of code which needs to be repeated on a particular event happening. So 5 keywords are done. I hope you're following. Okay, so this is very important to understand with respect to C#. Now, my question is that whether it is required to know this when you're developing web application. Absolutely, yes. You are still inside the .NET framework, which means how one language and one framework works, same logic or same almost similar way will be there for web application also. So now, wouldn't it be easy if I created a web application just like this, drag and drop controls, and then write code and then make sure that it works only if you click on the button, something like that. We will do all those things in the next unit, but this unit is just to make sure that you understand C#. So right now, I'm going to just pause here. Okay, so let's say whether you have a clear idea of what is object-oriented programming. Okay, now regarding the keywords, that's it. But there are some important things like inheritance, polymorphism, and encapsulation, all those things. Okay, so the first thing is what I'm going to do here. If you notice that even though I am creating a button, the button belongs to this form1 class. Okay, so if form1 is a class and button is also a class, how can I nest them inside? It's because now whatever button you put inside this particular form belongs to that form. Okay, which means this becomes like a parent and this becomes like the children inside that. Okay, so I'll just show you an example. Imagine if I put a few controls, like I put one more label. Let me just show here. Okay, let me just put a label. And let me also put, okay, I think that's enough. Let me just put button and label only. See, I'll put a few controls there. I hope it is clear. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of clicking on, right now you see there is a font applied here. Okay, I don't like the font which is already there because it's a simple and very thin font. I would like to change that into a bold or like a comic font or something like that. What would I do? Okay, I can choose individual controls and then change it, or I'll just click on the form, not on any of those controls. Please note, I'm clicking on the form which has all these 3 controls, and I'm going to its properties. Let me go to its property of the form. Okay, so please note I am in form 1 and its properties. Okay, so in font of that particular form, I am changing that font. Let me just remove this and say, let's say Comic Sans. Okay, and make it bold, and let me say 10, and then click on OK. So please note what I am trying to do here is, right now the form has Microsoft Sans Serif, which is a very, very thin font. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on a different font and say bold and click on OK. Now, I am only changing the font of my form. Okay, I hope you understand this. So let me see what happens when I click on OK. Okay, what happened to my form? What about the controls inside the form? They also took over whatever was applied to the form which I have in my program. So all these controls right now have this font. What about if I drag and drop a new control onto my form? What would happen? Okay, please note now this button has inherited its properties from the form which you have created. Okay, now this is with respect to inheritance. Now, what about access specifier or like encapsulation or abstraction? Please note it's almost similar to Java with respect to keywords here. Okay, public, you have one extra word here. You know, public, private, and protected. Here we have instead of the word protected, in Java, you remember that if you don't mention anything, it becomes default access specifier. In C#, it becomes internal. When I say internal, it is like within the project, it is available. Outside the project, it will not be available. Now, when I say why internal is new here in .NET, please note in Java, you need not bother about any other language. You need to focus on Java, and whatever you're importing also should be in Java. But when it comes to .NET, languages is not a barrier. So like how I did in the last class, I can also write the code in VB and import it into C#. That's possible. In that case, the access specifier must be public because they are not in the same package. They are not even the same language. They are not the same project. Okay, you are bringing as a reference from some other assembly to this assembly, which means they will not be allowed to access unless you mention them as public. If you remember last class, I made the class as public class 1. All right, so that's why it is available in my program. But if you make it internal, if you don't mention the word public, by default, it becomes only within this particular project's folder. Okay, so that's important for us because I don't want anybody to access whatever is available in my data. I just want to access whatever is given as public from other projects to me. Okay, let me not go into detail of that. We'll see that in C# in depth. Okay, now before we proceed, I also want you to understand here that form1.cs, what you see is very simple, right? You drag and drop controls and you put it wherever you want, and it works as you want. All those things are fine. But what about the code part? If you see the code part has nothing to do with creating a button. See, I have put two labels there, but nothing related to the label is available here in the code. But then how did that label come when I ran it? Okay, so let me go to Solution Explorer once again. I would like you to notice very carefully that form1.cs is the form, but it has one more file inside that called form1.designer.cs. This concept is very important, guys. I'm going to use this again in .NET also, in ASP.NET also. Okay, so in ASP.NET, you have file name.aspx, file name.aspx.cs will also be available. So just understand here. Now I'm going to just open form1.designer. You need not worry about this, but I'm just going to show you what is written there. Okay, there it's a big line of code which is written. Okay, if you see that some part is hidden from us, I'll show that shortly, but just have a glance here. All right, there are 4 controls on my screen. In the design, you see there are 4 controls. There are 3 buttons, 1 label. Let me go back to the form designer.cs. You see there are button 1, button 2, button 3. This color, guys, please understand it means it's a class. Okay, I hope it is visible. Okay, this color indicates that it is a class. Where is that class located? Inside system.windows.forms.buttons. Okay, so that button is a class. What is button 1 then? Object. So this is the object name, class object. So they are just creating objects. By the way, if you remember in in Android, I used to ask this question: what is the difference between initialization and instantiation? Okay, so both are same, or there's a difference. If you see in this line, all we have done is initialization. Okay, so you have initialized 4 objects here. But what about instantiation? That's what is hidden from you. You can see that it is hidden: Windows Form, Designer, Generated Code, something like that. Let me just open it. Okay, let me just zoom out. Open it. This method, somewhere you have seen this method, initialize component. Let's see where it is called. Okay, it has been called in form1.cs. In the constructor of form1, you are calling initialize component. Okay, and if you go to that code, initialize component, what and all is written. Okay, lots of code is written there. All right, but it is not written by me. System generates it. But if you see, this is basically C# code. Okay, so look at this code. What's the first line of code? Button1, okay, is equal to new, same package name, and then button. This is how you create an object, isn't it? So just create an object name, and then you're referencing to the same class, and say object name is equal to new class name. Same thing they have done. And for every object which you have, there is a property set. I hope you can see that. Okay, there is a property set called location, because when you drag and drop it in a particular place, where does it stay? Okay, that's important. So that keeps changing here. Okay, where is it storing, and what is the margin given? What is the name of that particular control, and what is the size, and what is the tab index, what is the text? Like this, name value pairs are there. All these name value pairs, we call them as properties. All right, last one, if you see, there is a new event handler. Please note the word event handler, and it takes care of, if you click on this button, what should I do? I should call a method called button1_click, which is again inside my form1.cs. That's how the a form has been created here in .NET. Okay, now is that required for us to know all these things? Yeah, because you need to know how a particular project has been structured before you even start with the project. That's why we had, if you remember, the last semester we took one entire class just to explain how the project structure of Android project stays. Same way in .NET also, it's important for you to know how it works. Okay, so these are very important parts of object-oriented programming, and this is how .NET has been structuring its languages. Now, if you notice, if you learn this language called C#, you can develop a desktop, web application, also a mobile application. So with this, I'll stop the Visual Studio part. I would like to just show you why we should learn and who and all are using .NET. So for that purpose, let me just open Microsoft's website. Okay, so I'll just say Microsoft. I just wanted to show you what they are all about. So Microsoft has a lot of products. Okay, out of that, I'm going to focus on the .NET part of it. So let me just choose .NET. Okay, you can see this is what they are describing it as. It is, you can see that this one keeps changing. It's a platform for developing web application, mobile applications, desktop applications, and also it goes to games. Okay, you can also develop IoT, and it goes on like this. All right, so they have all your apps basically. That's all. All right, so let me just show you their. This is what I've been discussing in the last 2 classes. What are the things you can develop with .NET in Microsoft platform? You see that web, mobile, desktop, microservices, game development, 2D and 3D, machine learning, cloud, Internet of Things. All these things are possible within .NET framework. Languages, if you notice, they are only endorsing 3 languages because it is theirs. It doesn't mean there are only 3 languages. You can learn about them a little bit more in detail. We are going to focus on C#, only first one. Okay, and we use everything in one platform, and you can just see what are the websites which are developed using .NET. I think most of them are not known to you, but some things are very, very familiar to you. If you remember Stack Overflow, all right, Stack Overflow is entirely developed with the C#. All right, with C# on ASP.NET MVC. Right now, they have moved on to code. You can click on this and see they have given more details about that in YouTube. If you want, you can watch that video in which they have told about Stack Overflow and how they have developed it. Okay, you can check that out. Okay, this is GE Aviation. They use .NET, UPS, GoDaddy website. Okay, and there are lots. There are lots of websites which use .NET Core as well as ASP.NET. So we are going to focus on ASP.NET part of it. Okay, so the reason why they all prefer .NET with respect to development here is because it's easy to develop, easy to deploy. Okay, developing should not be the only concern for us, because after developing there is a lot of other works like maintaining it. So .NET makes it much simpler because they have unified platform. There is no lot much competition available to give the platforms differently for .NET. So we prefer this. Okay, so these are a few things. Just go through this if you have time. Okay, and let me also look into something called Xamarin. This is also from .NET of Microsoft team. Okay, it's free, cross-platform, open source. Okay, it allows you to give a platform for building Android and iOS applications with .NET, and specifically with one language called C#. Okay, that's why I said C# is more important, and this syllabus just gives you an introduction into how to develop a website. It doesn't mean that if you learn C# only websites can be developed. That's why I just wanted to show you these things, that you can develop mobile apps which are cross-platform. You can also continue tooling with different operating systems. You can also use any operating system to develop Xamarin with, as long as it has .NET in it. It is native and it is performant app and it is cross-platform. Okay, all these things, but I'm not going to teach this, guys. It is not there in your syllabus. I'm just telling you that it is open source and free to develop using Xamarin for Android and iOS, which means, for example, if you develop it in Android, you develop only for Android. For iOS, you have to use Swift and develop it. But if you use Xamarin, which means if you use C#, you can create applications with respect to Android as well as iOS. You will write only C# code, which will automatically get executed in their respective platforms. Okay, and it is very active community. The Microsoft itself directly supports, which means if you have any issues, they give you a lot of support with respect to. Most of you would have found that when you search for problems with Android and you go, that there'll be Xamarin, there will be Cordova apps also. Okay, just to explain. Mobile to cloud is also easy with respect to Azure, just like Firebase for Android. Okay, but here it is integrated into one. So these things are very important, guys, to understand that why we need to learn C#. From tomorrow's class onwards, I will start with C# basics, and it is good if you know Java properly. Okay, I hope by now you all are thorough with Java, but I'm going to just take Java's ideas and then we'll see how to learn C#, because if you have not learned Java, then I have to start from the scratch with respect to C#. But since you already have Java idea, I'm just going to compare those two languages so that it's easy for us to grasp how to write it in C#. Okay, so with this, I'll stop my presentation and I'll stop the recording also.